Earlier in some of the debate, one of my colleagues, Mr. Rao, raised the issue concerned about being able to administer and tax and finance within staff additional responsibilities we were giving them. In this bill, one of the issues is around the Smart Schools Bond Act, and we've all heard, I'm sure you have, delays in that getting those dollars out. Many of our schools waiting for those. Have we done anything in this bill to provide more staffing at the Education Department so that the Smart Schools Bond Act funding can get out in a more quickly basis, or a more quick basis? I guess.
No.
More quickly. So we are left with them not being able to do this. Another question I had related to the medical assistance administration and the cost for that. When we first started going with that program, we were told that there wouldn't be cost to the state for that, and yet each of the years we've seen costs. I believe this year in this bill $134 million to administer that. Is there a time that we can anticipate where that program should be operating within its own resources? The New York State of Health
The New York State Health Exchange you're referring to? The staff? Yeah. So the majority of the staff are funded through federal funds, through Medicaid.
But don't we use
some portion?
A portion of that? Is that so you're saying some of the $134 million is federal monies? Do we know how much of it is state dollars?
Some of that certainly is it certainly is federal dollars. There are some state dollars. I'm not sure that we can get you that number now, but I certainly would share it with you after this.
Thank you. I appreciate through this process all your answers, and appreciate that finally this is the last bill that we've reached. On the bill, Mr.
sir.
Speaker, I'd started out this whole process. I haven't spoken on the bill, just asked questions as we've gone through, but with a great deal of optimism. I'm sure many of us are relieved to be here passing an on-time budget, but many of us had hope, I think, when we started in that this was going to be maybe a first ever, in my experience, of having an early budget when you had the convergence of the early or the religious holidays and the spirit of cooperation, I think, between the minority and the majority, from the administrative level to member level, certainly at our committee level and staff level. I do think it's been unprecedented. But I was prepared to consider a budget, I think, that was less filled with policy not really directly related to the finances of the state. Perhaps we did that a little better, but we also considered a budget the most piecemeal, I think, that it's ever been. We were voting on bills and went deeper into the process, being asked to vote yes or no on bills without, or while negotiations were still going on, without a final budget. So we really didn't have a full view of what we might have. So for the fifth consecutive year, we used the messages to get all the bills. The budget was negotiated, as it has been, behind closed doors with 2 or 3 or 4 men in the room, and without the presence of the minority leaders from either the Senate or the Assembly. And I just think as this budget's being completed, perhaps if a different perspective was in the room or at the table, Leader Kolb or Leader Stewart-Cousins, some of the issues that were stumbling blocks that people couldn't figure out how to get by, perhaps the perspective might have been there to help us not drag this out to this wee hour of the evening or morning and as many days as it took. But in the end, I think the residents of New York State got a more narrow budget, one without enough perspective if we were to include the minorities, and one personally that I felt in the end borrows and spends too much money. And even though we were able to take out a number of the taxes, still the burden on the taxpayers of New York is significant. And so a closed process today, again, leaves us with less than I think the people of New York State deserve. But I appreciate, again, not all of it is the responsibility of the members of this House, it's the full process. But if there's anything to take away is if we work together, ultimately we can come up with an end product for the people of the state. Thank you very much.